everybody, I think, has it wrong about Syria, and I don't mean this in any disrespect, Alex. I think a lot of people just haven't figured out that it was Erdogan was moved into a power vacuum in order to stop Israel from taking over the country. And the big story for me is how the Sunni world is coming together around Erdogan because and I'm not saying that it's a stable situation. I think Alex is right that it's not stable, right? But it's the best of a whole bunch of bad outcomes.
I think that the decision that was made between the Russians and the Iranians is to eliminate Israel, period. And I think that nobody, the Russians couldn't do this by themselves, and Iranians, it's a very delicate thing. But in a war, in a general conflagration centered around Syria, I think we're already on that trajectory, and I don't think I'm saying anything spectacularly new because we remember that in 2012 Kissinger himself said that there would be no more Israel in 10 years.
My name is Danny, and you're watching Capital Cosm. Today, we're going to wrap up the year with a geopoll discussion with three of the best geopolitical analysts that have come on my channel in the form of Alex Krainer, Tom Luongo, and Larry Johnson. Guys, thank you for making the time.
Thank you for
hosting. Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Just to get everything started, we're doing this on Christmas Eve, so please, Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yes. Merry Christmas. This will probably go out tomorrow on Christmas Day. So
even better.
Yeah, it'll be a nice little gift. So let's just dive right in, guys. Alex, I want to kick it off with you first. What is the top story on your mind? The last time you and I spoke, it was just at the aftermath of the fall of the Syrian regime over there with Bashar al-Assad. How do you see things transpiring? What has changed since the last two or so weeks since we've last spoken?
What's changed, I think, is that there has been a few, let's call it, indirect confirmations that the Syrian story is not as simple as Bashar al-Assad's regime fell and the new leadership took over, and now we have a transformation of the Middle East to the liking of the Western Empire. I think it's a lot more complicated than that, and I think it's playing out in that way. I'm a little bit amazed that everybody thinks that this new leadership somehow is the real deal. Without the backing of Turkey and funding from the United States and NATO, they don't even exist. They have taken over an economy that was essentially destroyed. It was practically functioning at a level of depression. So how do you run a complex society when your tax receipts are next to nothing? So I think it's a Ukraine 2.0 and only a lot more complicated. And I think that give it fullness of time and the thing is going to collapse like a house of cards. But I think that meanwhile, Ukraine has moved to the top story once more. I think that the Ukrainian military is on the verge of collapse, and I think that we are maybe weeks from Ukraine's complete defeat, which is going to be a defining moment for the Western powers. And we see as a result that the political spectrum in the West is in nearly complete and total disarray. We have pretty much across the Western world, we have dysfunctional governments. We have a voter revolt, which is being ignored and disallowed, which might bring us to events like the storming of the Bastille. I don't know. We are really in uncharted territory. So how 2025 unfolds is anybody's guess, but the predictions are quite dire. I think that 2025 could see the peak of crazy and chaotic blow up completely. We'll see.
Tom, anything you want to comment on as to what Alex just alluded to, and as well, same question to you. What is front and center on your radar screen at the moment?
What I'm watching right now is how everybody, I think, has it wrong about Syria. And I don't mean this any disrespect, Alex. I think a lot of people just haven't figured out that it was Erdogan was moved into a power vacuum in order to stop Israel from taking over the country. And the big story for me is how the Sunni world is coming together around Erdogan, because and I'm not saying that it's a stable situation. I think Alex is right that it's not stable, right? But it's the best of a whole bunch of bad outcomes, because it looked to me like everybody is really angry that Erdogan moved into Syria, and they're all angry for different reasons, and mostly because they all wanted Syria. And the truth of the matter is that only Erdogan, without without the Americans backing Israel completely, or the Russians backing the Syrian army, only Erdogan had the ability to actually make this happen for real, and then enforce any kind of peace. So I think Alex is right. It's about 18 times more complicated than anybody thinks at this point. But I think it's also a little simpler than everyone thinks. The goal that everybody should be hoping for is for the United States and Russia to get the hell out of Syria, and to get it the hell out, and by extension, the hell out of the region, right? And allow everybody who's been torn up and set it against each other by typical British perfidy, going all the way back to Sykes-Picot in 1916, that the best way for that to resolve itself is for all the players who are there, whose ancestral lands these are, to have to deal with each other without having the big bodyguard standing behind them. And I think that that's the possibility. There's a distinct possibility of that occurring in 2025 if Trump is allowed to take power. Because I don't think Trump has any desire to watch Netanyahu create greater Israel and move out to the Euphrates River. I don't think Trump wants to pay for Ukraine. I don't think Putin wants to deal with this nonsense with an belligerent Iran on the other side, because a belligerent Iran and a belligerent Israel that cannot stop being belligerent in each other for whatever reason. They're only this way because the United States backs one side and the Russians, by necessity, by secondary mechanism, have to be there in Syria, or in Iran, because Iran is the crossroads for the international North-South transport corridor, and for Belt and Road, and for the entire Eurasian independence project. Right? The not Eurasian, but Asian independence project, which is to get Asia out from underneath this Mackinderist style global geopolitics that have dominated our lives, going back now 3 world wars and before. That has to end. And I see Putin wanting to do that. I see even India, to a greater or lesser extent, wanting to do it. But the stickler here is the Iranian theocracy, but which is getting backed because of the massive amounts of pressure they're being put on Iran. It's a typical defense mechanism, like, well, better the devil we know than the devil from overseas. And that's why the theocracy has survived as long as it has, even though it's not well loved, right? So I don't think the Russians care. They don't care who's in charge in Iran, as long as it's someone that they can deal with. So it makes sense that the Russians would, in effect, pull out and allow Erdogan to come in and blunt Israel. And so that's the way I'm seeing Syria at this point. And I'm seeing enough stuff from the Arab press and from the number of people who have come to visit Damascus with the Turkish foreign minister and Turkish military leaders, that it's pretty clear that Turkey is in charge of the situation in Syria. For how long, I don't know. Whether or not I'm right in my analysis as to whether or not the U.S. is going to allow that to occur. right? I don't know. I'm hoping maybe this is rose-colored glasses on my part for what I think Trump is going to do in the region, but I think that you remove a belligerent Iran pushing towards nuclear weapons, and you take away the the unlimited support for Israel in the same way that Europe seems to have unlimited support for Ukraine. And I think the entire dynamic of the region changes in a way that is both chaotic and ultimately can actually resolve itself. And maybe this is the path to minimum bloodshed in the long run, even though it's going to be bloody.
Larry, do
I
you
stress the word. I stress the word minimum. I don't stress the word. I don't say zero. Minimum. I don't know what that threshold is, and I'm not here to speak to that. I don't know what Larry's saying, but let's throw it over to Larry and let's see what he has to say.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
there are no solutions, only trade-offs here, Tom. Larry, I want to get your take on both Alex and Tom's commentary right here. Do you agree or disagree with anything that they have had to say? And same question to you. What is the top story on your radar screen at the moment?
I'll put the top story would be Iran, but the broader issue is accurate information, vice narrative. What make both Tom and Alex such good analysts is they don't take narrative. They always try to drill down, find facts, find evidence that backs them up. What we've seen with the United States and NATO policy, for example, in Ukraine, it's been entirely based on bullshit. There was, Russia's weak. The army is terrible. They're having to build missiles with washing machines, the computer chips from washing machines and refrigerators. Now, we've heard that in the public narrative, but the reality is the intelligence community is saying that. And we just had another example of that when Trump was named, Person of the Year, and immediately begins talking about the disproportionate casualties that, Russia is suffering far more casualties than Ukraine. No, it's not. That's it's a bald-faced lie, but that's what the intelligence community is telling him. So what does this have to do with Iran? We're being told that Israel wiped out Iran's air defense. Iran doesn't have any air defense anymore. And all we got to do is go in and deliver a blow, and that'll wipe out their nuclear program. Israel believes that shit. The Washington establishment believes that. And that's what, why I said that's the number one worry for me, that they're going to act on that stupidity because things have changed. Russia has developed a relationship with Iran that they're going to formally sign into an agreement in about 25 days. And it's a broad-based strategic defense agreement with Iran. It's the West ignores the fact that over the last 5 years, Iran has conducted annual military naval exercises with the Chinese and with the Russians. That's just not, that's not like a couple of guys getting together and saying, "Hey, let's play poker."
Right.
No. These require meetings of their top military personnel, requires planning, commitment of resources. So the United States doesn't do exercises like that with nobody without having any sort of some purpose in mind. Right. So that's why I think the West's failure to accurately calculate what Iran is going to lead to potential conflagration. On that cheery note, Merry Christmas.
Well, Larry, I think you're right, and this is part of my, this is why I tried to couch what I'm seeing in Syria, and hopefully that, that this is that real information is being passed through some channel somewhere, right? We have evidence that there is real information going to somebody somewhere. Otherwise, things would be far worse than they are, right. And maybe that's part of the reason why Erdogan was allowed to come into Syria, because look, the Israelis clearly wanted the whole thing, and the response to their response almost seemed panicked, taking the whole of the Golan as quickly as they did, then going out and doing hundreds of airstrikes, hundreds of sorties to blow up to destabilize, effectively to destabilize as much of the country as possible, and to leave Erdogan a mess. So, and this is now the big question I have is, what's Trump's role going to be? And I'm not sure that we know that at this point. We have to bracket for both sides. I'd like these glasses to be colored rose, but I have to, like everything else, I'm still not convinced yet completely, because he's not in office, that he's going to get inaugurated. Tomorrow is, let's just hope that we don't have a Christmas surprise tomorrow. It doesn't feel like there's going to be, but you never know.
If I may,
Sure.
I really don't think that Trump can do very much. He can finagle diplomacy, but in terms of telling everybody how it's going to be and taking a tough
Yeah.
stance, I don't think there's very much that he can do, because the U.S. military power in the region has been pretty much hollowed out. So what are you going to do? You have carrier strike groups, and you have about how many? 63 bases there. And they're all sitting ducks because the Iranians and the Houthis, they have these hypersonic missiles, they have ballistic missiles, they have cruise missiles, they have ungodly amounts of artillery that they can bring to bear. And if somebody has accurate hypersonic missiles, then you can't even bring those carrier strike groups close to the theater of war. So, this idea that somebody's going to come to the aid of Israel, um, I think it's unrealistic. And in fact, one of the, one of the conclusions that something I suspected in the early days of the al-Nusra incursion in Syria is that we're going to see the end of Israel. I think that the decision that was made between the Russians and the Iranians is to eliminate Israel, period.
Mm.
And I think that nobody, the Russians couldn't do this by themselves, and the Iranians, it's a very delicate thing. But in a war, in a general conflagration centered around Syria, I think we're already on that trajectory. And I don't think I'm saying anything spectacularly new, because, we remember that in 2012, Kissinger himself said that there would be no more Israel in 10 years, which was due 3 years ago. But still, taking into account the dynamics in the region, uh, this is where I see the crisis going. And on a bigger strategic view, that makes sense, because Israel has been one of these Macandarian beachheads on the East Mediterranean, which served the purposes of the empire, from not only from the day it was created, but from the day it was conceived in 1917. That's the whole purpose. That was explicitly the purpose that Israel was created for. The story about the, homeland for the long-suffering Jewish people, that was the fairy tales that were being sold to the public in the West.
So
Yeah.
interesting, Alex. Really quick, don't Russia and Israel have some special type of relationship? Given the population of Israel's, a large percentage of them are Russian,
Yes.
Russian Jews.
Well, yes, that's the thing, Israel, I think Israel is the home to about 2 million Russian Jews. Um, that's where Israel has been a very, very delicate subject for the government of Vladimir Putin. But I think that it is enough for the Russians to say, "Y'all are welcome to come back when you decide." And then I guarantee you that a large chunk of those Russian Jews are going to think about coming back to Mother Russia. And then I don't know if this should be attributed to the media and the way they present Vladimir Putin's last press conference, but he did say a few unkind words
He did.
about the Jews, and he was, I think, politely, but his message was very critical.
Mhm.
And even if I didn't pick up on that, because he said, "Oh, the Jews and the Christians," like he put it all in a big thing without really singling out the Jews. But the way the Jewish community reacted to his statements is telling me, oh, they're nervous about this. Anyway.
Hmm.
Well, I think what he did was he explicitly called them godless Jews.
Well, he
Am I wrong about that?
you see, I'm not sure because you know how in the Bible, I think Revelation something something, it says
The other dimension in this, again, it's the disconnect from reality.
Mhm.
So that we keep talking about, boy, Israel's going to be in control of Syria. Now, last I checked, Israel was bleeding population. They weren't gaining population. So they don't have a growing pool of men that are signing up to say, God, I can't wait to join the army and go fight somewhere. So they've already extended themselves in Gaza, in the West Bank, and in South Lebanon.
Mhm.
Now they want to occupy territory in Syria. I'd like someone to explain the logistics of that to me.
Yeah.
How they're able to sustain that and then keep their attention on all these three other areas. I think what they're doing is they are weakening themselves. All the while they keep telling themselves, we're the best, we're the strongest, we're, whatever. And it's, I think as both Tom and Alex have pointed out, I think it's headed towards a collapse. Yeah, it's not sustainable.
Well, it's so similar to the narrative they keep telling us about Russia.
Yeah.
Like that the Russians have, like, let's put it this way. Does anybody really think that Israel could quell the various tribes of Syria and govern it effectively any more than Russia could effectively govern Western Ukraine? These are people that have been radicalized to the point where they
Yeah.
literally hate their own um own history, their own racial history. They hate Russians so much. They believe this that Russians and Ukrainians are such separate people at this point that it's just insane.
Yeah.
It's a form of societal gaslighting that's off the charts. There's no way the Russians want to or two can subjugate Western Ukraine and then they're going to invade Poland. Like what do like fucking bullshit. No, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
the same thing with the Israelis. The only people who could possibly pacify Syria are the Turks, because the Turks can stabilize things to the point where Syrians can go home and start pacifying their own country. And that's exactly what we're beginning to see. And I have a couple of different patrons who are following this very closely and like throwing me bit after bit after bit after bit after coming across the entirety of Arab news, like all across the Arab media, and it's all in support of what Erdogan's doing in Syria, and it makes sense. And while Erdogan is a crazy man and believes himself to be the new Ataturk and he's going to bring back the Ottoman Empire, at this moment in time, it's kind of like the Federal Reserve. My arguments about the Fed. They're not good. He's not a good guy by any objective measure, but he may be the guy you need at this point in time to do what needs to be done to start the process where this whole thing, this whole reality that we've lived with for 100 plus years now collapses and a new one starts to emerge. And then the question is, the temperament of the two men who have the ability to enforce that new reality, Putin in Russia, Trump in the United States, and say that's enough. And notice that who's screaming the most about this? Europe, who were the architects of all this bullshit in the fucking first place.
Yeah.
Can Erdogan be trusted, Tom, given the fact that he's a NATO member?
No, Erdogan will always act in his own best interest.
Yeah.
And so in that respect, he's predictable, right? And that's what we're looking for. You're looking for actors here who are predictable. We know how Netanyahu is going to act. We know how Erdogan is going to act. The question, we know what Putin would like to do, but no one will listen to him. And we also know that Europe is predictable. We know that the British are predictable. We know how they're going to act. We know how the European Union is going to act. The question is whether or not the question is the money and the time and the impetus. You know, the incentive structures are all wrong for the people of these places to continue to support this policy. So eventually, as Alex pointed out at the top of the show, it has been exactly what I've been saying for years. This is a race to the political bottom. Who can get to their preferred outcome before the political revolt becomes so freaking large that they lose everything? And that's why that's why everybody's under existential threat from the leadership, for all these factions that are trying to, trying to enforce a new reality. They're racing towards the bottom. And the people who are sitting back going, you know what? All we got to do is wait you out and we'll win. Yeah. And that's been Putin's strategy from the beginning.
Yeah.
And it's been very successful.
Yeah. And I think that from the, let's call it a big picture point of view, I think it totally makes sense that perhaps the decision was made that the region, let's call it the West Asian region, will be pacified by dividing the spheres of influence between Turkey and Iran, and that Turkey is going to maybe get to, how do you call it? Not colonize, but pacify chunks of Syria and effectively govern it for
as long as it's necessary.
For as long as, yeah, exactly, for as long as necessary. But I think that again we're going the scenario still inevitably the equation involves the elimination of Israel, period.
Or at least the pacification of Israel as well.
And well, pacification, yes, Tom, but you see, I think that pacification of Israel means that it becomes a one-state solution there. Mm-hmm. Two-state solution is gone. And that means that part is going to be, the Jewish people are going to have to make peace with Christians and Muslims.
Agreed.
And it's going to be some form of either a democracy or whatever it's going to be, but it's not going to be a Jewish theocracy, a belligerent Jewish theocracy. That is over.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. That's fine as long as we're redefining Israel. I think the idea that anybody's going to allow Israel to be taken off the map as a thing, I think that's going to be maybe in 40 years after we're all gone, we may get to a point where Israel is no longer necessary. But for this iteration of this cycle, Israel will survive. But politically,
I think it's going to happen in my parents' lifetime.
Yeah. Well,
okay. We're wrong. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm just like the amount of I think that there's a grand bargain here. I mean, this goes back to you and I talked about this stuff going back ages ago. 7 years ago, we talked about the potential for a grand bargain in the Middle East, where everybody gets a piece, where the Kurds get their piece, and and all of it. But it's going to be ugly because a lot of people are not going to be down with the new reality, and they're going to fight to the bitter end because they have to. Go ahead.
Hey guys, quick pause. I won't take too much of your time, but if you're looking to add into your gold and silver stack, please consider Miles Franklin. More specifically, email them, info@milesfranklin.com, and tell them that Capital Cosmos sent you in the subject line to unlock special pricing that you won't find on the website. In the unlikely event that you don't like the prices, you could always not buy. There's no commitment necessary, but I do recommend Miles Franklin for a number of reasons. The customer support is top-notch, the prices are great, and I know the people there. Great people all around. So with all that said, let's get back to the video. Thanks, guys.
Well, when we go through history, is there historical evidence to support the proposition that ideological fanatics survive and create prosperous, thriving regimes. Because what you're looking at, the parallels I see between the Israeli settlers, who are absolutely uncompromising. They
Mm.
don't accept Jews. They don't accept Christians. They even don't accept some Jews, and they certainly don't accept Muslims. Um, the sort of the fanaticism that's akin to what we see among the Azov battalion, the neo-Nazi crew in Ukraine.
Right.
And neither of those, what I'll call extremist ideologies, seem compatible with being able to make some of the practical decisions for governing that allow for any kind of compromise. And they're so brittle
Mm.
that they either crush everything or they get broken in the process.
It's a
Well,
fair point, Larry. It's a very fair point.
I think, Larry, that your point is answered in the fact that if it wasn't for the United States and the constant financial and military aid that Israel obtains from the United States and some other countries, that project would be completely unsustainable.
Yeah, yeah,
And the idea that Israel was created so that the Jews would have a homeland and a safe place, so that they can, avoid pogroms and Holocaust and things like this that they have experienced through history. That doesn't work either because
yeah,
Israel has now created greater danger for Jews than anything we've seen since World War II. So it's actually making Jews less safe around the world. And Benjamin Netanyahu, who has been their prime minister for about forever, has been absolutely delinquent in this sense. Not only is he doing what we see him doing now in Palestine, that's going to cause a total train wreck for Israel, but even during the 2020 and 2021 COVID pandemic, he was there, rubbing shoulders with the good and the great in Davos, bragging.
That
Have
starts getting really. That gets starts getting. It takes me to a really fucking dark place.
yeah.
No, it is because when Israel was being created in the 19 in 1917 was the Balfour Declaration. Balfour Declaration was written by Arthur Balfour, who was the foreign minister for Britain, to Lord Rothschild.
Mm.
Arthur Balfour was best friends forever with Nathan Rothschild, who was Lord Rothschild's son, and he essentially lived at the Foreign Office. Nathan Rothschild Jr. was basically at the Foreign Office with Arthur Balfour all the time. And so, why is that important? Not because the Rothschilds are Jewish, but because the Rothschilds are the bankers. And for them, control of the Middle East was absolutely paramount because they already understood that the region was extremely rich with energy resources. We're talking about it was extremely strategic because until then, not long before that time, people almost exterminated whales for energy.
Mm.
Whales were being killed not for food, but for oil.
Yeah.
We're extracting the whalers were extracting oil from the whales, right? And now they discovered, oh my God, there's this petroleum thing there, and Middle East is chock full of it. So we need to control that. And to control the Middle East, they needed a beachhead there because they needed to be able to deal remotely somehow with all these Arab tribes that were Muslim, that had their own ways of organizing society and dealing with trade and dealing with colonialism and so forth. And so we even have testimonies um, uh, um, from Chatham House, from the roundtable discussions, that they identified the need to populate Palestine with what they called a particularly, um, they didn't say fanatical, they said with a particularly patriotic stock, right?
Hmm.
that was the plan. And I don't know if it gets any darker, but obviously they the intent was to use the Jewish people as the pawn in the game. And there's no it's no better than using them as pawns in the Pfizer vaccine promotion.
It's somebody. I think as you were speaking, Alex, something finally popped into my head about I keep going back to the fundamental fight. We go back to the 19th. You start thinking about the 19th century and the discovery of oil, right? Now, I don't remember when oil was really discovered. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's something I should be able to look up, but since we're doing this thing live, I'm like, and we've got oil like bubbling up out of the ground in Texas, right? How much do these people? They tried to break the United States up. We know this in the 1840s and 1850s in order to continue their trade surplus with the United States, to keep the United States on a trade deficit relative to industrial Europe. So now think through this idea that they could see, in terms of energy, they understood that the United States had a massive supply of cheap energy that was literally just bubbling up out of the ground. Same thing with the Russians. But Europe didn't have that. Europe had some oil resources, but they knew they didn't have anything close to what the United States or the Russians had. And then they find out that there's oil all over the Middle East. So, of course, it makes perfect sense for them around the time when remember, the Balfour Declaration is what, 1916, 1917, right? It's about the same time as Sykes-Picot, right?
17.
17. Okay. So Sykes-Picot is 1916. The advent of World War II. World War II breaks out, World War I breaks out in 1914. They get Woodrow Wilson installed in the United States with his Anglophile, first real Anglophile president of the United States. After us direct election of senators, Rothschild-style central bank, direct taxation, blah, 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 blah. After the Civil War failed, the British started a shift in their policy towards the United States, going from our greatest enemy to our greatest ally. Moreover, one could argue that they laid plans for setting up this whole Israel thing with the Scofield Bible and all the crazy nonsense to create the dispensationalists and the Mormons and everything else, all these fake Christianities that are of a North American variety. Why? Because at the end of the day, I mean, again, I hate to like paint like a linear narrative picture, because of course history doesn't work this way. But I'm specifically trying to put my head in the mindset of the people who are the architects of these policies. These people would have a linear through line in terms of how they think, right? And then do they have the political power and the economic power to shape history that way? Yes.
But creates
and so now the question is, have they really been setting up this whole fucking thing in order to grab, like, it makes perfect sense once you understand that the Russians have a shit ton of oil, the Americans have a shit ton of oil, and Europe doesn't. Europe continues to try and grab all the Middle Eastern assets, and then all you have to do is turn the United States. All you have to do to unbalance the game board is get the United States on your side and get the United States not utilizing its own resources, but going and fighting and dying over in the Middle East for their resources.
Yeah, it's essentially who has and who doesn't have the collateral. Larry, I think you wanted to chime in.
Well, no,
Alex is smiling because I think he finally. I thought that or this. I see hands behind. Oh, look, Alex is growing a four set of hands. He's turning into Kali as we.
Somebody's bombing my video.
No, I was just going to say that to Tom's point, the power of ideology and how people are taught to look at the world, the rose-colored glasses. It's in terms of, if you are taught, for example, that the return of the Jews to Israel is a sign of the end of the world, and that therefore you've got to do everything you can to promote and enhance it. There really are people out there that believe that. And some are in policy-making positions. And so that's why these kinds of religious beliefs, and you find them also within the certain segments of the Jewish community, certain segments of the Islamic communities, where they've all got these very different ideas about the end of times. And it's just they're all in a race to see who can light the fuse first. And that's a wild card in this, that goes outside of where the people who think that they're in control, like the ones that think, like Erdogan. If Erdogan thinks that he's in control of Syria, I laugh at that.
Mhm.
Because this he's got some control, but he will discover that the different Sunni tribes that are still running around Syria, particularly the criminal drug gangs, they got a say in this as well. And so that's why I say there's some wild cards out there that make it less predictable.
Larry, what's the next country to fall in your opinion? You're already starting to see the cracks forming in Egypt, in Jordan. Do you anticipate any ruptures with any of those two countries, or maybe somewhere else?
Well, no, I think right now the country that's going to probably potentially suffer the most will be Jordan, because before with Assad, at least you had some measure of control. There was at least a system of control. Not a great system, but some. Now, when it's every man and woman and child for themselves, that's going to create a refugee flow. And some are going to, if you live close to Turkey, you're going to try to get into Turkey. If you live close to Iraq, go to Iraq. And if you live close to Jordan, head to Jordan. Well, Jordan is probably the least capable of handling that kind of increased stress. Go ahead, Alex.
I have a question, Larry. You might know the answer to this question, but I was recently on a podcast, and they with a podcaster named Think Bricks, and they sent me via WhatsApp a news report from the Arab world, and the report was, I think it was from Lebanon. The report was that the Hezbollah would start paying out $40,000 per household to Palestinian families that have lost their homes. I thought there is no chance on this God's earth that that report is true.
Right.
It strikes me as impossible. But then I thought about it, and I thought, wait a minute, because one of the things that the Iranians have specialized in over decades now is counterfeiting US dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And the US dollar is the glue that is holding all of these disparate jihadi groups and all of this, this whole imperial colonial system of outposts are being held together because people are receiving US dollars. And so I was wondering if there isn't something to that story, because that would be a way to make the dollar not a factor anymore if you inflated it to the point that it became worthless in the region.
Well, let's not forget that I'll call it a global network of these Muslim families that come out of Lebanon. So I did a lot of undercover investigations into counterfeiting, money laundering in the Cologne Free Trade Zone. 30%, 35% of the merchants in the Cologne Free Trade Zone are Muslims out of Lebanon. And then when you start looking at the family networks, they've got cousins, brothers, uncles that are in Maicao, Colombia, that are in Ciudad del Este, Paraguay, that are in Iquique, Chile. They are merchants, and it's literally a global network that stretches back into Africa and into Asia. So there's a whole pipeline in there that money can also flow through channels that the United States doesn't control. I mean, it's the dollar, but we don't control it. The amount of money that flows through the Cologne Free Trade Zone. If you go to their official website, they'll say, "Oh yeah, we do $5 billion a year in merchandise." 24 years ago, I did an audit of one of the businesses in there. It was the guy sold, one guy with two sons. They sold counterfeit baby clothes, designer baby clothes, but they're all counterfeit. And they had a 3,000 square foot storefront. They made their gross revenues $80 million, just that one little business. So that's what I'm saying. The amount of money that's flowing through some of these free trade zones, particularly gray money, black money, Western economists don't have a friggin' clue about.
Right.
And so that's where something that what you're raising with Hezbollah, yeah, sounds plausible to me.
Yeah,
Alex,
Interesting.
Alex, at the start of this session here, you mentioned that the top story for you was the imminent collapse of Ukraine. Can you go into more detail into that?
Well, we're seeing it seems that the Russian gain of territory and strategic posts in Ukraine is accelerating, and that the panic in the ruling circles around Zelensky is also accelerating. And you're seeing more and more of these what the Robert Fico's recent speech stunned me, where he said that Zelensky was offering him $500 million to support Ukraine's accession to NATO. I mean, 500 million is a lot of money for a country that's technically in default.
Right.
So it's and Slovakia is one small member of NATO. So to offer 500 million to Robert Fico strikes me as a fantastic thing. It's astounding, but it seems to me that it's raw panic, that it's raw panic. And because at this point, not only is Ukraine being defeated militarily, but I think that Zelensky might be extremely desperate himself for some kind of a political gain that he can show at home and see, like, oh, look, I still matter. People still back me and support me. And then another piece of news over the last few days was that the British are considering sending troops to Ukraine, among other things, to help with recruitment, which means that their recruitment drives are not being successful, and now they're pushing towards, going for the 18-year-old cohort. And so, wouldn't that be an absurd thing to see the British forcing 18-year-old Ukrainians into the trenches? And then they are stripping their air defense units to send those specialists that man air defense units to go into the trenches, which is madness. I don't even know what to call that, but that's simply insane. You're like literally now. I've used this phrase a lot, but you're literally throwing the kitchen sink. They have maybe more than one kitchen sink, but it's telling me that the situation on the ground must be absolutely dire. And so, in light of all that, I think that maybe we're very close to Ukraine simply capitulating, and the Russians just driving all the way up to the Dnieper.
One can only hope.
Let me just jump in real quick.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Because I'm gonna have to jump here in a minute or two. But the reason I was laughing at the Brits, you saw the news headline the other day. They got more soldiers resigning, and they can't even replace the ones that are resigning, but they're going to send them to Ukraine. That goes back to my comment at the outset. This divorce between reality and the delusional narrative. Hey, I'm sorry to jump off, but Tom and Alex, always a pleasure with you guys. Honored to be with you. Merry Christmas to
Good to be
all.
with you, Larry. Merry
Thanks,
Christmas. Take
Larry.
care.
Thanks. Bye.
Yep. Take care. Take care, Larry.
All right, Tom, expand on what Alex has just spoken to in regards to Ukraine. How are you seeing the situation over there evolve?
Yeah, no, I think Alex has got his finger on the pulse of this, not his thumb, but his finger on the pulse of what's happening in on the ground in Ukraine. And the $500 million, that's clearly money that is coming out of the desperation and panic that you see the money pledges that have come in from the West over the last couple of months, and going back to stuff that Alex and I talked about, and Alex originally uncovered back in August, and we've been watching it play out since then. That there's a real need for money to flow into Ukraine in order to ensure that the the debts and the loans and the this and the, all the money that's been promised and has continues to flow in there. It's like it's this basic idea. It's, as always, it's extended pretend. I'm thinking now specifically from the perspective of the British and the Europeans, who are absolutely whole hog all the way in. We're going to support Ukraine forever and a day because they don't have any other options. And again, why are we in Ukraine? Because Britain and the Europeans have no collateral. Why are they playing this game in the Middle East? Because they have no collateral. So the plan was clearly to hold on to political power in Europe and the UK for as long as possible, bleed the Russians white, bleed them out of money, bleed them out of men, bleed them out of material and everything else, keep control of the United States from both a monetary and a political perspective in order to keep the money and the material flowing in to keep bleeding the Russians with the intended goal, as they've told us multiple times, to break Russia up into multiple pieces so that they can then start to get control of all the collateral in the Donbass and everything else, and then use those future cash flows to pay back the people who paid for the buildup of Ukraine in the first place. These people owe a lot of money to a lot of very powerful people. Ursula von der Leyen owes money, in effect, or the European Commission owes money. And so they have to keep pulling it out of the people in order to keep the money flowing in, to keep Ukraine alive for as long as possible, in the vain hope that they can bind down Trump, keep him from being able to do anything, and still get their war and win their war. That's what they're trying to do. It's nothing new here. So seeing the $500 million thing, bounty that, or bribe that they tried to offer Robert Fico in Slovakia, no surprise, right? Because at that point they've got to try and change the facts on the ground in order to continue the process. They still want to stage World War III from Romania, which is why they won't allow a populist government to come to power in Romania. And more importantly, Romania is a really important port on the Black Sea. So they still see themselves as being able to kick the Russians out of Tartus. They've just taken they've added Sweden and Finland to get control of the Baltic Sea. So they're now, okay, Russia, you want Crimea? Well, you're not getting anything else, right? Oh, and then we're going to take out Iran as well. Nothing has changed with these people. They still have their big Gantt chart up at Evil Corp Central. They still have a plan. And that plan still is being executed with the idea that they have Trump controlled and ring-fenced. And I don't know that it's at this point whether it's real or it's their only move left on the board. That's the question you have to ask yourself. If it's the last move they have on the board, then Alex is correct, and the whole thing starts to collapse in the next 6 to 8 weeks, or starts to collapse after Trump comes back to power. Putin's smart move is to go all in Ukraine and take as much territory as possible and force the situation on the ground in such a way that it blows open the last of these false realities that Ukraine can win. I don't know if the Russians can do that. They have not proven that they can do that, but Putin has been very, very cautious about this. He's even copped to the fact that has made mistakes in how he's handled this to the Russian people in that same in the same series of I think in that same interview actually. He copped to the mistakes that he made in handling this. He waited too long to go into Ukraine. That. So it's like all of this now is it's all playing itself out this way. So at some point, Putin understands that he can't push too hard until the time is actually right, because otherwise the West will, use that as some means by which to go whole hog in against him. So their next move here is ultimately, I just had it and it just kind of left me at this point. But it's for them, they have to gin up a reason why. Oh, I know what it is. Why? How can they get the American and or European people to go along with the war that they want to fight? Well, they got to make the situation so desperate on the ground for the European people that 3 hots in a cot and fighting and dying in a trench war is better for their family. They've got to get men, fighting age men in Europe, to the point where they did the same thing to the Ukrainian people. When men went and fought because it was better to get a shitty salary, and to send the money back home to keep their wife and children fed. That's the plan at this point. So you're watching them actually literally gut their economies and gut their. That's why Keir Starmer is doing what he's doing to the British people, because he's trying to get them to the point where he can, so desperate that they're willing to take military scrip that they can spend locally on bread and oleo, on fake bread and fake butter and fake meat and everything else, in order to kill them off and fight and extend and pretend in Ukraine. That's their plan. And then they're hoping that they can run that script for the next 4 years and wait Trump out. Like, I think that's where they are at this point. And I'm looking at the numbers and I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work, because, and so let's shift and let's ask ourselves, are they going to be able to make that a reality in Germany? We have snap elections coming in a couple of months in Germany. Right now, you see Friedrich Merz, the head of the CDU, drunk on a typical ab reaction against the SPD, similar that we saw an ab reaction against the Tories in England, right? That brought Keir Starmer to power. They're allowing this snap election to happen in Germany because, they can cobble together a grand coalition of the SPD, the CDU leading an SPD, say Green coalition, with current polling around almost 58% of the government, of the Bundestag, and make sure that there's no change at the top of the German political situation. The only thing that will change is that the Greens, no matter what happens, the Greens get kicked out of their veto power in the upper house. But this is a rearguard action. Okay, well, the Greens have lost in the state elections in September, so now we have to back up and we have to at least control the Bundestag and the chancellorship, right? Because we're going to lose, and then we have the SPD and the CDU with veto power in the Bundesrat, but that's okay because they're going to be in power now. Because the CDU will never, under Friedrich Merz, make a deal with AfD. So now the question is going to be, can they make that happen between now and February, which is why they allowed for the vote of no confidence, which is why they allowed all of this stuff. It's all a typical fucking game with these people. They understood that if they let this go another 6 months, or let this coalition play itself out for another 6 to 8 months, that eventually AfD would start polling 25, 27, 28%, and it would make that electoral calculus, impossible. So now the German people have got the same problem, the same choice in front of them the American people had 2 months ago, which is back AfD and stop this nonsense, if they even understand what the situation is. And I don't know that they know that yet. And but you know, that's where we are with this. And you know, we could wind up in a it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. Trump is, I think, very smartly literally saying, "Oh, you want to fight a war in Ukraine for in perpetuity? 5% of GDP goes to defense." He knows none of them can afford it. That's literally him saying, "I want to break NATO. I want out of NATO." That's what he's saying. So, and we're going to put tariffs on you as well if you don't stop it. And we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and you're going to give us Greenland. And we're going to stop the Chinese from owning the Panama Canal effectively. And we're going to do this and we're going to do that. He's saying all this stuff. So it's so.
What's that all about, Tom? What is buying Greenland, Canada, 51st state, Panama Canal? What does all that have to do with anything?
It's as always. I don't know about Greenland. Greenland for me is a weird move, to be honest with you. The Panama Canal makes perfect sense, which is that the Americans are refocusing under Trump, are going to refocus all of their foreign policy away from Eastern Europe, Russia, the Middle East, China, and pull back and, do a new Monroe Doctrine. And that's why Marco Rubio was Secretary of State and blah, 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 blah. They want to control what goes through the Panama Canal coming in through Mexico. They want to lower those costs. They want to literally bring Mexico into the United States, in effect, into the United States, and not have it be a destabilization vector going forward. So we'll see. I don't know. I don't want to place too much on, of a plan on Trump at this point, but he's had 4 years to think about this. He's had 4 years to put a group of people together who understand what the real imperatives are. And he's certainly acting at this point as if he agrees with me about almost all of this.
Yeah, his cabinet picks are very interesting. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's fine. I mean, and I don't mean, I'm not saying that to bust my hand, pat myself on the back line. This is my analysis, and it seems that Trump is acting in accordance with that analysis. If he wanted to actually make America great again, well, the way you do that is by, finally just stop, supporting an empire that doesn't benefit us.
Yeah,
because it doesn't.
Yeah, I find it very interesting. A lot of the negative commentary that goes around, Trump's recent cabinet picks, like Rubio, like Hegseth, that they're Middle East hawks, they're Iran hawks, and so forth. But if you really dig into it, I mean, who is Pete Hegseth? He's a Fox News host. Who is Marco Rubio? I mean, Marco Rubio compared to Trump is a pushover. I mean, Doesn't it seem like Trump has effectively made himself Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense? I mean, these guys are not going to offer much pushback in the process. Do you see what I'm saying?
Rubio certainly not, because Rubio is as compromised as they come.
Yeah.
I mean, he has a very high, what I like to call MEQ, million envelope quotients.
Yeah. I mean, these guys are all nominally neocons, but when it really comes down to it, practically, they're going to do what they're told. Who is Pete Hegseth, really?
Right. He's going to be a guy who ultimately his job is, he's been given the job to clean up the military, to fix it, because it's been destroyed, because Obama destroyed the military in order to get it involved in a bunch of wars that it was going to lose. That was the goal. It's not hard. Obama hates America. If Obama's not MK Ultra, or he's not the original Manchurian candidate, or actually, let's put it this way, the Brussels candidate, the I don't know, the Parisian candidate. How's that? It's a better metaphor than Manchuria. He wasn't created by Manchuria. He was created, or it was London. He was created by either London or Brussels, or whoever. Pick your Frankfurt, if you believe in this whole Frankfurt School thing, right? So whatever. That's the way I view Obama. And that was his goal, and he operationally did everything imaginable to hollow the United States out at every level, including the military. So what's Hegseth going to do? He's the Secretary of Defense. He's going to fix the military. What's Marco Rubio going to do? Well, he clearly has, he's going to go and rejigger American foreign policy around a North and South American thing because Trump is rightly worried about the Chinese coming in and trying to colonize South America. It's not stupid. So, I mean, Trump is many things. He's not dumb.
Right.
So
yeah, I want to wrap things up here, guys. But before we do, I want to, leave the table open for you. If there's anything you guys wanted to talk about that we didn't get to quite yet, Alex, anything you want to talk about, and where can people find you?
People can find me on X. My handle is @nakedhedgie. Um, I also have two Substack publications. One is my personal Alex Krainer Substack, where I write stuff of general interest, including geopolitics and history and things like this. And then last month I launched a Substack for traders called iSystem Trend Compass. So that's that. And what do I want to say? I want to say Merry Christmas to all who celebrated. A great start to 2025 with prayers for peace and love of mankind to carry us through this dark period.
You got to follow that up, Tom. What do you got to What do you got to say?
I agree with Alex completely. Merry Christmas to everyone. As a matter of fact, Merry freaking Christmas to everybody. Let's literally stick it into the eye of the globalists and say Merry Christmas, regardless of, and it's not Happy Holidays, folks. And I'll say Happy Hanukkah to the Jewish people in the audience, and it's like let's celebrate humanity in the best, because humanity has been given a choice that it didn't have before July 13th when Trump lived. And I really do believe that we've moved into a different timeline and we've been given a different path. And now we have to close escrow on this. And, the future is not set in stone, but we lay our will upon the universe. We can change the way we move, the way things happen. That's the one thing that these terrible globalists keep trying to take away from us, that we have any agency left in this, that we have any power left. We have all the power as people, and they can't do what they want to do. In fact, there's a limit to how much fake money can buy fake wars in service of fake religious conflicts in order for them to continue to living their disgusting lives. These people are vampires. They're evil, and they need to be taken and put out the pasture. And if there's one thing we celebrate this Christmas, is that we're ever closer to that than we've been in any of our lifetimes. And I never thought we'd actually be here. I wear black a lot for a reason, folks. Pretty freaking black-pilled in my soul. I want to believe that we can be optimistic about things. I present optimistic scenarios about how these things can play out because I want to make them manifest, not because in my heart of hearts they're my base case scenario. So you can follow me on Twitter at TFL1728. You can follow me on my blog at tomluongo.me, goldgoatsandguns.com. You can support the work over at Patreon at patreon.com/goldgoatsandguns. And let's make 2025 the year. If 2024 was the year that everything changed, let's make 2025 the year that we begin rebuilding.
Build back better.
And build back better.
Is there a more awkward way of saying "Make America Great Again" than "Build Back Better"?
It's a really terrible phrase. I mean, it's just bad English.
Yeah.
On top of it.
Well, they do everything like that, Tom. Haven't you noticed? No? It's like everything they do is shit.
Well, except kill people. They're really good at that.
They're good at that, yeah.
They're very good at that.
We'll also follow Larry Johnson at sonar21.com. He's not here to plug his website, but I'll plug it for him. Sonar21.com. That's also down the links down below. I'll have all these links down below there, guys. So be sure to check out Tom, Larry, and Alex's websites and socials. And then finally, thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give us a like and subscribe to the channel. A little bit goes a long way in helping us grow. And then check out our Substack, capitalcosm.substack.com. I think a portion of this interview might be posted exclusively on Substack. We'll see. I'll have the link to my Substack down below to check it out as well. And then finally, if you got value out of this video, you'd like to support me monetarily, then check out our partners at Miles Franklin. Email them, info@milesfranklin.com, and tell them the Capital Cosm sent you to get special deals and pricing on gold and silver that you won't find on their website. With all that said, thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you next episode. Bye, y'all.
Take care. Thank